this is our third Delve of the year, and we are so excited to have you and introduce our speaker, Dr. Mia Chung, to you.
Yeah, so Dr. Mia Chung, she's an incredibly accomplished pianist and a faculty member at the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia. She graduated with a bachelor's degree from Harvard College, received a master's degree from Yale University, and a doctorate from the Juilliard School. She has appeared in the Alabama, Baltimore, Harrisburg, National, and New Haven symphonies. It's pretty dang cool. She has also spent time as a faculty member at Gordon College in Massachusetts and is the founder and board chair of MIT's Octet Collaborative. Dr. Chung has spoken at several Veritas forums over the years, and we are very, very excited for her to host our Delve today through Veritas. So, and with that, Mia, I'd like to turn it over to you. And
Thank you so much, Wyatt.
Go ahead and start
Pleasure.
sharing my screen so you can have your presentation. Good.
Great. Well, it's such a pleasure to be here with everybody. Thank you for taking this time out to hear my talk. You might be curious to know why I chose this topic of music and human flourishing. And it so happens that the last 2 years, I and a few other colleagues have worked very hard to establish a Christian study center alongside MIT. And it's called the Octet Collaborative, and the mission of Octet is to create a community of MIT faculty, staff, and students who are committed to human flourishing as formed by the historic Christian faith. Now, you might be wondering why human flourishing is part of this mission statement and even an area of interest for me. It so happens that the topic is very hot right now in our culture, and it provides an opportunity for us to engage all people in the conversation about something we all hope to experience, whether one believes in God or not. By engaging the topic of human flourishing, you actually open the doors to new and other conversations about who we are, what we value, and why we are the way we are, and to do so in an inviting way. So I'd like to call up slide number 1, just to give you a summary of my talk, so you'll know sort of where I'm going with this. It's basically 4 points. The first is I will describe music making as a picture of human flourishing. And the second is to share some of the psychological and neurological research that supports this concept of flourishing. The third is to talk about how our weird society, that's an acronym for Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic society, approaches music. And then the final point, I'll share about what we can do about this situation we've gotten ourselves into. Okay, so I'll start with this concept of human flourishing. How is music making a picture of this abstract concept? And what is flourishing to begin with? To my thinking, music making is a form of worship. I am a Christian, and I'm defining human flourishing as the full integration of self. In the Jewish prayer of the Shema, which is in the Old Testament, Deuteronomy 6:4, it says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength." That is the picture of an integrated self, where all the faculties are united as one. And in Matthew 22, verse 37, the verse says, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the number one commandment." So loving and worshiping God requires the fullest devotion and integration of self, the physical, the emotional, the intellectual, and the spiritual. So it's a beautiful picture. These verses capture beautifully this idea of complete integration. Now, as those created in God's image, music making with its integration of self is an act of worship for those who believe and even for those who don't, because everyone is created in the image of God. and has this desire, longing, and ability to create. So why have I chosen music making as an optimal or ideal picture or metaphor of this kind of flourishing? Let me demonstrate this by pulling up my second slide. And I'm going to just ask you, throw this out there, what do you see in this image? You could just shout out what you just, you could describe the folks who are playing the music. You can describe the facial expressions of the people listening. This is Leonid Kavakos, Greek violinist, Emmanuel Axe, American pianist, Yo-Yo Ma, American cellist. And they're playing in a piano trio, a Beethoven piano trio. And you actually see this lady sitting next to Emmanuel Axe. She's the page turner. And then you see the folks on the stage, is sort of close, this proximal presence of the listeners near these performers. So just shout out what you see. You can just describe with adjectives. Whatever you see is fine. So just tell me.
Friends.
Friends. Okay. Relationship. Excellent. Anything else?
I definitely lots of joy. Oh,
Joy,
both of us.
especially in Yo-Yo Ma's face, right?
Yes.
Anything else? Other words?
Peace.
Peace. Excellent. Look at Emmanuel Axe's face. There's an intensity about this.
Yeah, like maybe like a focus.
Yes, excellent. Excellent. Look at some of the audience members' faces. How do they look? Are they bored? Are they looking at their phones?
There's definitely a sense of everybody's pulled towards something, one central point.
Yes. And there's this vicarious enjoyment of what's going on. They appreciate what I would describe as this experience that's immersive, okay, that is transcending the realities of life, basically being caught up in a new reality. When anyone looks at this image, most people are in agreement, universally understood, that this is a picture of flourishing. People are in community, in relationship. They're creating beautiful music, which requires rhythm, harmony, melody. And these three aspects of rhythm are completely united. They are playing together in time. They're completely in sync with one another. And the people who are listening are wrapped in attention. They're very present in that moment. It's like they're creating a new world, a new reality. Now, this image of complete immersion or transcendence doesn't come from nothing. There are some practical elements to music making that lead to this kind of experience. First is establishing a goal, that is to study music, to be a pianist, to be a violinist, whatever it might be. And then the second is getting a teacher, having someone who can mentor you and guide you, disciple you, if you will, provide feedback that helps you understand your strengths and your weaknesses, and most importantly, holds you accountable. And then the third area is practicing every day so that you can gain mastery and improvement. Notice that I didn't mention talent. I did not make this experience of transcendence conditional upon talent and ability. Now, what does the psychology research reveal about this act of music making? Well, back in the late 1990s, 1998 to be exact, there was a psychologist by the name of Martin Seligman at the University of Pennsylvania who started the School of Positive Psychology. And positive psychology studies positive things about human experience, positive emotions like love and peace and joy, positive elements or virtues that we strive for in our character, such as humility, perseverance, kindness. They also study institutions and organizations that bring positive qualities to our society, such as religious institutions, schools, community ventures, et cetera, et cetera. And this school of positive psychology really took off in the late 90s and, of course, into the 21st century. One of the members of this school of positive psychology is a professor by the name of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. And he is a Hungarian-American psychologist, positive psychologist. And what he has done, contributed to this conversation on positive psychology, is described what it means to be happy. What's going on in our psychology or our psyche when we experience something called flow, this ecstatic state of happiness, okay, where you're actually creating a new reality, you're immersed. Okay, so he did a lot of researched, nuns, blind nuns, monks in a monastery, athletes on teams, musicians, artists, composers, et cetera, et cetera. And he shares this quote from a composer. If you could pull up slide 3. The composer describes, this anonymous composer describes the state of flow for himself as the following. You're in an ecstatic state, such a point that you feel as though you almost don't exist. I have experienced this time and again. My hand seems devoid of myself, and I've nothing to do with what's happening. I just sit there, watching my hand in a state of awe and wonderment, and the music just flows out of itself. So there's several things that you'll notice about this state that the composer is in, this state of flow. First, there's no self-consciousness. Self-consciousness is completely lost. It turns out that the human brain can only process about 110 bits of information per second. So when one is absorbed in some craft, creating, or activity that's immersive, your brain can actually not focus on any more information that it's receiving. In other words, it stops paying attention to the fact that the tummy is growling, or that the right hand is a little sore from grabbing the pen too hard, or the checklist that's on the table of things that need to be accomplished. One also loses track of time. So this state includes a sense of timelessness. The third element to this is that you feel like this complete sense of love for what you're doing, that you're intrinsically motivated to keep being involved in this activity because you enjoy it and love it so much. And the fourth quality is this ability to surrender to the moment. Now, it so happens that positive psychologists have also demonstrated that flow is enhanced when this state is experienced with others, which is really interesting. So now let me show you and describe a little bit more about the components of flow, or this ecstatic state. Wyatt, if you would pull up slide 4, that would be great. Now in this chart, you'll see it says challenge versus skill in the flow state. Challenges is marked by the y-axis, and skills is marked by the x-axis. This ideal state of flow happens when there is great mastery that meets great challenge. So you notice if we're low on the x-axis value, which is close to the intersection of the challenges and skills axes, but we're high in challenge, then we actually experience anxiety. On the other hand, if we're high on the x-axis value, but we're low on the challenge axis, we begin to experience boredom because our mastery is greater than the challenge that we're presented with. The maximal flow happens when you optimize skill with challenge. You rise to the challenge and you are equipped for that challenge. Now, what's going on in the brain as we do this? Wyatt, if you could call up slide 5, that would be great. It so happens that in music making, we actually draw upon more regions of the brain than any other human activity known. So I've just presented two images of the brain, just two areas of the many parts of the brain that are activated when one is making music. The hypothalamus on the left image there actually releases endorphins, which gives us a sense of joy, right? And endorphin release can happen when you run as well. I mean, all sorts of other activities can also stimulate the release of endorphins. On the right image, you'll see the frontal lobe highlighted. In the frontal lobe of the brain is what we call the executive function, the ability to organize, to think, to order stimuli as they're coming in to our brains. It so happens that there are many other parts of the brain that are activated. The amygdala, which I don't have an image of here, stimulates emotions. We're able to understand others' emotions. We're able to respond in kind in the music making. The auditory portion of the brain, you imagine, is listening. The visual portion of the brain is processing notes. Never mind the motor parts of the brain that are controlling our motion. I don't know if you know this, but when one is playing an instrument like the piano, and engrossed in that act of performing and playing, there are some 2,000 neural firings that pass from the brain through the nervous system to the hands and back per second. It's pretty astounding. So when I look at all of this, the way in which the body's involved, the emotions are involved, all of our faculties, our intellect, all I can think of is Matthew 22:37, right? This is the picture of loving God as creatures who were created in his image, producing music that is drawing upon our soul, our strength, our mind, our emotions. This is the fullest picture of the integration of our faculties, the fullest picture of worship. Now, I've spoken about music making from an individual's perspective or experience, and I want to pan out now and take a look at our culture. Is understanding our history and our context are really important for understanding why music making is in the place that it is in society right now. We are a weird nation, as I mentioned before, Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic nation. And this has had a very serious impact. You know, what's emerged in the economy, in our societal values, in our culture, it's had a serious impact on music making. So how so? I think what will be helpful is if we go back in time and look at our American history, maybe back in the 1920s, to get a sense of what music making was like in our country during a different phase of our economy. So it so happens that we are a weird nation because we're one of the earliest countries, along with Western Europe, or earliest regions in the world, and Japan, to actually experience an industrial revolution. But this industrial revolution, which was primarily focused on manufacturing, established a creation or making-based economy. We made things, we produced things, raw materials, items. And in 1929, Wyatt, slide 6, please. There was a national survey that was done on music making in America. And this was actually done by the National Bureau for the Advancement of Music. There actually was a national bureau that advanced music. 679 companies were surveyed. These are manufacturing companies, right? Or department stores, retailers. And what they found was among the 679 companies surveyed, there were 911 active music groups. Can you even picture that? I mean, it's astounding. 182 orchestras, 176 choruses, 133 plants, factories with mixed singing groups. And now, if you're wondering what industries, these were railroad industries, department stores, steel manufacturers, electric companies, textile companies, oil refineries, etc., etc. The list goes on. And these are not the only kind of groups that were going on. There were all sorts of quartets, saxophone quartets, ukulele groups, marching bands, etc. And so music was a central part of American culture and life, a vibrant part of it. It defined the way in which we engaged one another. It was a central part of our workplace, our community. It was the nexus of work and community. And people, of course, were not as transient back then. So where are we now? I mean, this was the picture way up until the end of World War II. We are now in what we call a post-industrial economy, which is a service-based economy. Manufacturing has moved out of the country, like we manufacture things all over the world, but we've moved on from this sort of manufacturing-based economy on to a service-based economy, and that's why we call it a post-industrial economy. We're service-oriented, which means we are focused on a certain kind of skill base that is no longer about making things, all right, tangible material things. And this post-industrial economy has ushered in great prosperity in the United States and affluence for many, not for all, but for many. And in this economy, we actually value monetizable skills, okay? We prioritize abilities in humans that can be converted into money and results, productivity, okay? So now our priorities are about getting into college, having the skills to get into college, but also then to graduate from college and to get a job. And while doing this, we've created a hierarchy of skills that are more valued or more important than others for this economy. And sadly, people are judged as people who are worthy of skill development and those who are not, based on aptitudes, strengths, on and on. Now, in this economy, the gap between those who have and those who don't has grown very wide. And really the marker of this gap is the college education, those who can access that education and those who are not able to. Because our values are aligned towards results and monetization, music making has gradually diminished in our society. Our public education has spent less and less, progressively less and less money and resources towards educating people in how to make music. And it's in part because we can't reduce music making down to a concrete set of skills that has a one-to-one match with some job opportunity. Now, more recently, we have defined the necessary skills in terms of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And why? Because we realized as Americans that we would not stay competitive with the global economy unless we trained our students to acquire skills in these 4 areas. And the intention, of course, is to keep us as the leader in technology, innovation, and research. Now, this is an important development. More recently, you'll see that that acronym of science, technology, engineering, and math is including the letter A. So it's become STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. So you might say, so why are you complaining, Mia? This is great. You know, now the arts are getting integrated back into education. That's true. However, there is an extrinsic reason for this. It's very result driven. In other words, the arts are in there to promote imagination and creativity. Promote creativity and imagination that will help the science, technology, engineering, and math brain, which will then help them keep us, America, in the lead in these areas of technology and innovation. So the arts are used as a means to something else and not intrinsically valued in and of themselves. So now that music is not a central part or an important part of our societal life or even the public schools, much of music making in the US has been relegated to recreation. And you might say, well, that's great, but here's the rub. In this recreation, music making is more about the professionalization of music skills, that is gaining mastery so you can attain access to something else, be it college entrance, the winning of competitions, gaining fame and money. It's about some extrinsic reward. And in this process, we are actually weeding out talent based on aptitude. We are judging through this process of selection who is worthy of music making as a recreational endeavor. So we're actually keeping people out of the joy of music making because of the way that our economic and societal values are aligned. The saddest part of all of this, as I mentioned, this great divide between the haves and the have-nots, is that the folks who are left behind are those who are most underserved. The poor, the disenfranchised and marginalized are the ones who cannot afford to make music. They don't have access to teachers, to instruments, to programs and opportunities that the children of affluent families actually do. It's an unfortunate reality. Now, I wanted to just as an aside say, there's perhaps a similar phenomenon going on in sports as well, with soccer training camps for kids that start at the age of 4. And it's all about getting recruited to college. And this joy of just playing soccer on the field for the sake of enjoyment is something you don't see very often. The idea of play and recreation for pure joy. So this is not just about music. But there's something very different as well between sports and music. Everyone somehow recognizes that exercise is good for everyone. So we would tell a student who has no athletic prowess, you should still exercise, even if you're not going to go, play on the soccer team, right? But we don't actually do that when it comes to music. Music is somehow talent and music aptitude based, which is a fallacy. Music making should be for all. Now, I mentioned recreation. I wanted to just add this other subset of information regarding the way that we use our time and leisure. Because we become affluent and because we are no longer making much music, guess how we enjoy music? We buy it. We don't make it, we buy it. We have a consumer mindset that has taken over our culture. And this consumption is passive. It's something that we do without thinking. It's in the background all the time. There are more people who are subscribing to streaming services and have access to MP3s and 4s, YouTube. Music is everywhere. It's ubiquitous. The challenge is that it's keeping people from actually making music themselves. And positive psychologists do talk about leisure activities and this idea of flow. It happens not when you're passively recreating. Actually, you don't enjoy your off time, your leisure time as much when you're just relaxing or sitting there, passively taking it in. You actually are more restored and enjoy your free time more if you are on this growth trajectory that is making music challenged, gaining mastery, and entering that state of sort of ecstasy or flow. We all understand this intrinsically, that playing music or making music is better than listening. If I had a penny for every time backstage after a concert, someone came up to me and said, Mia, I really enjoyed the concert. I played piano till I was 12 and then I quit because I couldn't stand practicing. And my parents let me. And that is one of the great regrets of my life. Well, the regret is understandable, right? But what this is highlighting is that the person, although they enjoyed the concert, they knew intrinsically that they would have enjoyed it even more if they had made the music themselves. Technology and increasing affluence have gone alongside these developments. and have had a significant impact on music making. We are the victims, if you will, of our own technological success. In 1877, Thomas Edison invented the phonograph. And it had a serious impact on music making. The height of American music making was in the 19th century. And I found this beautiful quote by these American sociologists, Robert and Helen Lind, comparing music making in 1925 to music making in 1890. And this is what they said. They found that working class and business class kids, so these were, kids from blue collar families versus kids from, upper class families. These children were increasingly taking more music lessons between 1890 and 1925. Isn't that interesting? More and more of them were engaged in music making. But for the adults, it was the inverse. And this is what they say. Music for adults has almost ceased to be a matter of spontaneous and active participation, has largely become a passive matter of listening to others. And they conclude, when great artists or dance orchestras are in the cabinet, in the corner of one's living room, okay, the phonograph, the ability to play may be increasingly in less demand. So what do we have now? Now we have musicians who are mega stars, idols, and their music making is disseminated through technology far and wide. So we've actually substituted the real thing, which is music making, with a lesser experience, that of listening to the music of the stars. And in classical music, we've also done this. We idolize the musicians who can play technically perfect, right? Because of the recording age. All we hear are recorded perfect performances. Even though there's no meaning in the playing, we champion and idolized the player. So this is how far we've come. We used to be a very different America. We as a society understood the intrinsic value and benefit of making music up until about 1950. But the changes in our economy and consequently our values have altered the way that we view the things that bring us flourishing. And that can be said of many other activities. So I'm going to close by asking this. How can we change this? How might we view music making in a way that benefits everyone? Wyatt, would you call up the last slide, please? The first step to democratizing the experience of music making actually happens, it happens one person at a time, but it begins by having music making available to everyone, no matter what their age, class, ability, location, demographic may be. A significant step to achieving that is actually just having people watch someone who's playing music for sheer enjoyment. Just observe their body movement, the concentration in their eyes, the enjoyment of the music, music for music's sake. And then next, I challenge all of you, especially if you're not music majors, to pick up the guitar that's in your closet and start to explore the sounds that it can make, to experiment, make note of the amazing things that it can do, and then create a goal for yourself. I want to play this favorite piece of mine by the end of the year, for example. And find a great teacher, someone who can motivate you and hold you accountable to learning. And then practice every day, just a little bit, to gain some mastery. Seek others that you can play with and enjoy the experience together. And lastly, spread the word. Form groups. Make music together in your backyard, at your library, at your school, your place of employment. And for those of you who are musicians or are in training, I encourage you to bring others along for the experience. Play with those who are not as far along as you. Keep an eye out for a child or an older person who could benefit from playing an instrument and raise the idea with them. And if the resources are limited, just sing. The barrier is very low. So the possibilities are endless. What if our culture produced or valued music making for the sheer joy that it produces? What if music making, as in the 1920s, was part of your work life, your social and communal life, a central piece of education? Imagine, for example, music making in the Amazon warehouses. I know it's a funny idea, right? Funny image. Or in the offices of Facebook, or in the lobby of a law firm, or music making at your local hospital, or the back room of a post office where people are sorting mail, or in prisons. And the list goes on. The joy of music making is for everybody, but it comes with a price. Nothing short of a reordering of our priorities can actually make this happen. Championing the intrinsic value of music making over the something that it will get you is what it takes. And by experiencing and sharing the thrill of music making, you will introduce a new way of living, a new way of thinking, of being, that paves the way to even deeper conversations about life, about the things that matter, about man's purpose, and ultimately about man's design. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Big Zoom round of applause. That was wonderful.
Yes, that was fantastic.
I have so many notes on my page right now. I took out so much from that. Well, now we can go into a Q&A if you have any questions for Dr. Chung, or if, yeah, any questions, any comments, feel free to speak up.
Or put them in chat if you don't want to unmute yourself.
Actually, Wyatt, can we stop the screen share?
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Now I
Perfect.
can see all of you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Don't be shy. You can ask what I had for lunch. There's no wrong question.
Well, I just have a question about the Octet Collaborative. So this is part of your work with the collaborative. I was just wondering, is the Octet Collaborative as a whole addressing human flourishing? Like, how do these two relate?
Yes. So at MIT, of course, and I actually see one of the alums here, Jihoon Kriska, and I'd love for her to chime in. There are people of a range of very different talents, scientific, artistic, in the humanities and social sciences. And it's about gathering the Christian community together to say, what marks and defines flourishing? How do we bring our Christian faith into the things that we do as chemists, as physicists, as English professors, as musicians, right, as creators, instead of creating these siloed areas of our lives? I'm a chemist, but I also go to church on Sundays, but the two worlds actually never meet. So it's about this idea of investing our faith in the context in which we live. And actually, Jihoon Kriska, who's a friend of mine here, I met through the Octet's activities. Jihoon, I'd love for you to share some of the work that you're doing. Jihoon is an MIT graduate, and I think she has her bachelor's and her PhD from MIT, and she's a musician. And so we've had many wonderful conversations about the intersectionality of music and faith. And Jihoon, do you mind sharing some of what you're doing as an example of a conversation we've been having at Octet?
Sure. Actually, Mia, this has been an amazing talk. So just briefly, my training is in electrical engineering, and I worked for 20 years in the semiconductor space. Actually, my first job was in Palo Alto with HP, back when it was just HP. They had an orchestra, and I remember thinking, this is so weird. Yeah, they did. In fact, when I came to New Jersey, I'm in New Jersey now, and I started working for Lucent. Lucent also had an orchestra, but that went away within years. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a kind of overlap, natural affinity between the sciences and the arts. Right?
Mm-hmm. So I actually, I kind of ended up in the arts in a kind of backdoor way. like Mia said, my family had a very kind of traditional view of, you know, you go to college so you can make money type view. So, so I became an engineer. And even though I played piano all my life, it was just considered like, you do that as a hobby. Literally, that's what they would say. You do that as a hobby. It's got nothing to do with your life, really. But then, and then I actually quit piano. I quit piano when my son was born, and I stopped it. Didn't really understand the value of it. During that time, we live in a suburb of New Jersey, and I don't know if any of you are from the East Coast, but it's out here is very segregated. If you're in the suburb, then you know you live in a little affluent bubble, and even though Newark is like 5 miles, 10 miles down the road, you never see it. And there's like practically no people of color around here. So, but I knew I didn't want my kids to grow up in that kind of bubble. So my husband and I decided to attend church in Newark, which is today it's about 50% Black and 50% brown, various types of immigrants. We, when we got involved in Newark, I started to learn. I started to see that kids really are the same, but they are deprived of a lot of opportunities in Newark. And one thing I just noticed right away was music, because for whatever reason, I insisted on my own kids learning piano as a hobby. But I did notice that that all that brain development science, I've never read up on it, but I did see it in my own kids, like that little synapses connecting. And I saw that the skill development was it diverged very quickly between my kids and the kids growing up in Newark, not because of an inherent talent, but because of opportunity. Because when they were in kindergarten, I couldn't see a difference, but I saw the divergence happening very quickly as they grew older. And I noticed they had no music in school. There was no chance of taking extracurricular music because it was so expensive. There's more to the story, but long and short of it, I decided to start a program in Newark teaching piano, which is what I know, to kids growing up in public housing. And everything that Mia said is true. I never did like the studies behind it, but it does, the act of like doing something so challenging, but it just, the kids will say it themselves. They say, I love coming to piano. I mean, you never hear suburban kids saying that. You have to like drag them to piano class, right? But these kids who are so deprived of other distractions in their lives, when faced with this like ability to grow their skill along with being faced with growing challenges, they love it. They're addicted to it. I mean, I have to kick them out of a Zoom class every day. It's like, bye, see you guys later. It's amazing. What Mia said is all true. It's such a gift. It's such a gift. And through the kids' eyes, I started to realize the value of music.
So now, I mean, just Ji-hoon as an example, she was an electrical engineer, and she actually said goodbye to that former life after being one for 20 years, having a PhD in electrical engineering. And she's devoted her life now to sharing music making with the most underserved children. And so it's this sort of idea of bringing these conversations together, how we as Christians bring flourishing through our disciplines, our abilities, to the various contexts that God brings us into. So maybe I hope I've answered your question, Sophie.
Yeah, you did. Thank you. It also answered my other question of how we can help underserved communities learn music, because I know you mentioned that earlier, and I was like, oh, well, what are some practical ways? And yeah, that answered that as well.
Even singing is an amazing art. If you gather people together and sing, you know, your heart rates actually synchronize. And the reason is because you are breathing at the same rate, you're singing the same rhythms, right? And you're bound to the same meter and time. And what happens, you instantly feel a sense of connection. I sometimes wonder what would happen if our Republicans and Democrats in Congress actually made music together. I actually think there would be change. That's probably one of the few ways we could break down this wall, is to develop some affective resonance between them. So the power of this possibility is really underutilized, I would say, in all manner and contexts of life.
Well, yeah, I have some comments and question. I'm sorry, I'm not part of the college or Veritas, but I was invited, and I mean, it really had to be God, because so much of what's been in my soul was articulated today. Like, I can't even believe what you have shared today. And speaking of the flow, I experience the flow when I'm sitting with my client. I'm a psychotherapist, and ever since I was young, I had the deepest desire to create music. But unlike typical, my ethnic background is Korean, but unlike typical Korean families, I was not given opportunities to learn music, and I always longed for it. And I even went and I looked for music teachers at various times, and actually they have responded to me very kindly. But those efforts were always stopped by my mother, so I couldn't continue. And another part is that I have noticed that undying longing. I don't really know how to really play any musical instruments, but the desire is always there. And at the same time, I have noticed very blatant the exclusivity among musicians.
Yes.
Because you're not invited. You're not invited at all, right? Other than as an audience. And the inaccessibility of the music community. Because I actually thought about, couldn't I just get together with some people who just want to sing? Because there's amazing power in creating a harmony together.
Yes.
That the goal isn't to have amazing performance, but just for us to enjoy. And we just moved, and I actually created a music space. Mind you, I'm not a musician, but the desire for music creation is just so profoundly there. So we have very, very old, probably out of tune guitar my husband inherited. And I do have a small harp, because I used to want to try to play the harp, and I did a little bit, had to stop that, and we have a keyboard. So Mia, my question is, for people like me, I'm in my mid-40s, closer to 50 than 40 now. I don't see myself going to music school. And I have met people who express the same, I don't want to say regret, because we still have life ahead, right? The desire to include more music, but not just as a listener, but participant, creator. And I am so, like, I don't want to say determined, but actually I am, that I want my child to just enjoy music.
Yes.
Not be a slave to, I must do this well for this school or anything like that, but it's naturally in him. He's always singing, always praising God. So I'm wondering, what would you recommend for someone like me?
I always
and
do
what
something.
for myself? Yeah, you always do. And also as a mother, how can I create such environment for my child where it's not another task, but just part of our life?
I think the best way is not to say music making is from like 3 to 4 or practices from 3 to 3:30, like to take away all the margins of what that is, so that it's integrated into your life schedule at any point. Singing is probably the best way to connect with others. It's a deeply human thing. I think it stimulates the amygdala perhaps most powerfully, that the emotion center of our brains, and also as a part of relationships. So if you have other moms who have kids, just gathering together, and even as moms singing together, incorporating the children, but really breaking down the barriers to when this can happen, so it happens naturally and spontaneously. I think creating that kind of environment is great, which then requires a very non-scheduled lifestyle, right? Which is completely the antithesis of the way we live our lives now. So I don't know if that helps, Jihyun, but that's what I would do. Get out of the schedule and make it unstructured.
Thank you.